This isn't just a story, it's a cry from the soul of nature. Beneath the pale November sun of Leicester, England, something quietly profound stirred within the concrete walls of Twycross Zoo. A story not of captivity, but of legacy. Of lineage, of love passed down through primal instinct and gentle eyes. The crowd came that day for a simple zoo visit. They expected exhibits and maybe a few photo-worthy animal moments. What they got instead was a glimpse into something ancient. Something deeply human yet wildly untamed. In the gorilla habitat, the mighty silverback Umbi, known among the staff as the heart of the troop, was settling into his rest. After hours of gathering straw with the thoughtful precision of a creature who understood comfort, he lay basking. In the sun's fragile warmth, the golden light casting quiet halos around his powerful frame. Children gasped at his sheer size, adults marveled at the noble stillness in his breath. To them he was strength personified. But to two young souls hidden in the shadows of the enclosure, he was something far more sacred. He was Dad. And as with any father, rest wasn't a guarantee. The righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the kindest of men is worn down by their joy. In the flickering hush of the gorilla pen, Lope and Shufi Umbi's spirited sons were more than just curious apes. They were wild hearts on legs, bubbling with energy, testing boundaries, and unknowingly scripting one of the most heartwarming animal stories ever captured on camera. Their bond with each other was unbreakable, but it was their relationship with their father that pulsed with a kind of cinematic tension, the ageless dance between playfulness and authority, innocence and experience. The moment Lope's eyes locked on his father's still form, you could almost hear the mischief ticking like a timer. His plan, simple yet potent, disturb the king. As the younger Shufi hovered with hesitation, Lope crept forward, his steps as silent as a hunter, but with the intention of a child poking a sleeping parent to play. The audience, already sensing the drama, pulled out their phones, unknowingly becoming witnesses to a story that would later ripple across the internet as a viral YouTube story, a dramatic wildlife rescue of patience, a wild bond in motion. Children are a heritage from the Lord, but sometimes they come in the form of trouble with a tiny laugh. Lope didn't just approach his father. He invaded his space with the unfiltered boldness only youth carries. First, he stood nearby, pretending interest in the surroundings. Then he loomed, a little closer, a little bolder. Umbi opened one eye, closed it, opened both, exhaled. The crowd chuckled, a father, caught in the eternal dilemma of deciding whether to rest or parent. What came next was visual poetry. Young gorilla bouncing in playful defiance, a massive silverback trying, really trying, to pretend he didn't notice. But Umbi, ever the embodiment of grace in furred form, didn't react with aggression. Instead, he chuckled. A low, thunderous rumble that echoed like a lullaby from an ancient soul. Some zoo workers swore he even shook his head like a tired dad on a Sunday morning, his eyes rolling in fatherly defeat. Lope saw it as encouragement. And with that, the real mischief began. Fathers, do not exasperate your children, but also beware of their playful wrath. Lope's mind was a spinning wheel of creativity. Where others saw wood shavings, he saw possibility, props, for the stage of his rebellion. With a gleam in his eyes, he grabbed fistfuls and crowned himself with the flakes. The audience erupted, laughter, cameras clicking, children pointing. There stood a wild prince in his homemade crown, challenging his father's calm reign, but it didn't stop there. No, Lope was just getting started. Stealthily, he slid toward the barrier wall, the symbolic divide between his mischief and his father's peace, and began stealing straw from Umbi's resting side. Each handful was a declaration of independence. A silent giggle turned into rebellion. On the other side, Umbi lay motionless, only his breathing hinting at the storm he was holding back. Their eyes met through the slats, one young, filled with fire, the other ancient, filled with patience, stretched thin. This wasn't just a scene from a zoo. It was a universal truth. Sometimes love is tested through noise, through pokes, through straw-stolen battles. Even the lion grows weary of the cub's roar. Then came the crescendo. Lope, emboldened by his silent victories, began pounding the barrier with his fists. The sound was loud, persistent, a beat of challenge, and Umbi, the gentle giant, finally responded. Not with violence, not with rage, but with a single, thunderous thud. His massive hand struck the wall once. A sound that silenced the enclosure like a closing book. The air stood still. Even Lope paused, breath caught. The line had been drawn. Yet still, the young gorilla wasn't done. He began plucking grass, casually pretending innocence, trying to play it cool. And when their eyes met again, something shifted. A moment raw and primal unfolded. No one spoke, but the entire crowd felt it, the passing of generational understanding. A conversation without words, a declaration of limits, a story written. In fur, straw, and silence. Honor thy father, even when you think you've won. From the side of the enclosure, Shufi peeked out, his small face barely visible as he watched his older brother dance too close to danger. He looked at his father, then at Lope, then retreated. Even he knew something was coming, and then the twist. The moment that made this story unforgettable. Lope returned once more, walking into the very space Umbi had claimed for his rest. One final push, and that's when it happened. Umbi, without drama, without a roar, reached beside him. Slowly, deliberately, he grabbed a handful of the stolen straw. The crowd leaned in. The sun caught on the silver strands of his back, and then he placed it on his own head. A crown. A surrender. A joining. It was a father saying, I see. You, a king telling his heir, let's dance, not war. It was a moment that cracked the sky wide open. The greatest among you will become like the youngest, and wear the crown of humility. The audience erupted, laughter, tears, cameras shaking from people's joyful disbelief. This wasn't just an interaction. It was a spiritual collision, a touching animal story that blurred the lines between human and beast, between parent and child, between tradition and joy. Lope, overwhelmed with joy, followed suit. He piled more straw on his head, twirling. Like a jungle prince in his father's kingdom. The enclosure was alive, not with noise, but with meaning, with connection. With something you could never fake, never script, just feel. The internet would later call it a viral YouTube story. But for those who stood there that day, it was something more sacred. It was proof that even behind thick glass and concrete walls, the wild knows love. The wild knows family. And the wild knows how to laugh. An animal is calling, will you answer? The air buzzed with laughter, camera shudders and awe as Lope spun in dizzy circles, his little arms outstretched, wood shavings cascading off his head like falling petals. The audience couldn't get enough. Children pointed, adults chuckled, and even the zoo staff watched in quiet amazement. This wasn't just entertainment. It was a glimpse into the soul of nature, a mirror to our own families, captured in fur and straw. Lope's eyes sparkled as if to say, look at me. Dad's playing my game. But behind those gleaming eyes, something ancient stirred, a rhythm between innocence and consequence. Because every parent, whether gorilla or human, knows one truth: indulge a child too much, and the game will escalate beyond joy. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the love of a father draws the line gently. The crowd didn't know it yet, but that light-hearted moment was the peak before the storm. With a deep breath that seemed to shake his entire being, the magnificent silverback rose. Umbi didn't roar, he didn't beat his chest. He simply stood, and the air changed. His eyes narrowed not in fury, but in exhaustion and resolve. Perhaps he was trying to collect himself, to avoid losing his cool in front of all the eager human eyes. Perhaps he even hoped to reclaim just one quiet corner for himself, but the boys weren't done. As Lope and Shufi followed their father again, giggling and scheming, it became clear peace was not on today's agenda. That final straw, perhaps literal and emotional, broke as Umbi's attempted rest on the sun-drenched grass was once again sabotaged. And in a blink, a flash of silver muscle and instinct, he charged. Even the meek must roar when silence is no longer enough. It was quick, terrifying, magnificent. The children watching from behind the glass fell silent. Adults gasped. Phones trembled in their hands. In a single, ferocious motion, Umbi made it clear this wasn't just a tired dad. This was a ruler reclaiming his kingdom. Zoo workers remembered a moment just weeks earlier. Umbi had leapt with thunderous force onto his mate and sons when pushed too far, reminding them all that gentleness doesn't mean weakness. That earlier video, now quietly circulating online, wasn't shared to paint him as aggressive but to teach the world a vital truth. Even the kindest gorillas are still wild animals, still kings in their domain. Now the crowd waited. What would he do next? Do not mistake grace for absence of power. Even the softest hand can strike when tested. Lope's small frame froze, his eyes wide with a new understanding. Shufi didn't hesitate. He fled, his tiny feet pattering toward the safety of his mother or the dark comfort of their enclosure. For a moment, time seemed suspended. Lope's triumph turned to trembling. His chest rose and fell faster, his earlier mischief now wilted under the weight of his father's rising fury. But Umbi didn't strike, he didn't growl. He simply looked, a look that said more than 1,000 roars ever could. That look held disappointment, authority, fatigue, and most of all love, a love too deep to be soft in that moment. Lope whimpered. His body slumped, and with hesitant, slow movements he backed away. The defiance faded. In its place bloomed something new: respect. The eyes of a father speak the language of legacy, even when his voice stays silent. Lope turned away, not in shame, but in thought. The lesson had landed, heavy yet needed. He wandered in search of comfort, a new game, perhaps even a way to regain his father's approval. Meanwhile, Umbi finally lay back in the grass, closing his eyes, reclaiming the serenity he'd been denied all day. Lope found Shufi soon after, and together they began a softer game, one without crowns of straw or stolen shavings. The sounds of their gentle play soon floated through the enclosure, washing over the crowd like a breeze after a storm. Visitors giggled about the early antics, zoo staff began putting their phones away, and families slowly drifted toward other exhibits. The viral footage of the gorilla family had already begun spreading beyond the walls of Twycross Zoo. For most, it seemed like a happy ending: lesson learned, family restored, laughter may rise after correction, for love always lingers even in discipline. But behind those walls, beneath that peaceful surface, something unseen was stirring, something that would make today's playful drama seem like a footnote. Because while all eyes had been locked on the father-son tension, a deeper trial had been unfolding. A test of Umbi's soul, one that would not involve games or straw crowns, but devotion, worry, and the fragility of life. To understand what was coming, you must go back to 2009 when Umbi first arrived at Twycross Zoo. It was there that he met Ozala, his chosen mate. Together they formed a bond that echoed across the trees, and by 2013 their first child, Lee, was born. Then in 2016, they welcomed Shufi, and on September 24th of that same year, a tiny miracle named Shui entered the world. Each birth was a moment of wonder, tiny black eyes peering into existence for the first time, tiny hands reaching out for warmth. Before I formed you, I knew you. Even if you are covered in fur and born beneath jungle skies. From their very first steps, Lope and Shufi clung to their father's every move. He was their son, their protector, their silent teacher. Whether pounding his chest or gently feeding Ozala, Umbi gave them a map to follow, a guide into the wild intricacies of gorilla life. Their bond deepened with every game, every correction, every quiet moment shared under the African sky painted across their enclosure. The scene where Umbi had charged was one such moment, a father not punishing but parenting, reminding his sons that love has limits, that play has boundaries, and that even in families, especially in families, respect must be earned. Up a child in the way he should go, even if that way begins with rough play and tender growls. But even kings are tested. Even fathers fall to their knees when the one they love begins to fade. And soon Umbi would face a storm unlike any other. It began subtly. Ozala's playful energy grew dim, her appetite faded. Her once bright gaze dulled with exhaustion. The zoo staff noticed quickly. Worried, they separated her from her family. To run tests and scans, praying the cause was something treatable. And thankfully, it was a simple fever, common, manageable. But in the heart of a mate and father like Umbi, even a mild illness can stir primal fear. The veterinary team worked fast. Medicine was given. Slowly, life returned to Ozala's body. Her movements became surer, her appetite returned. And yet, even as her body healed, a deep weariness lingered. One that no medicine could rush. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, even while waiting behind glass. When the time came for her to return, the reunion was quiet but deeply moving. As she stepped back into the living space, still weak but smiling with her eyes, her sons rushed toward her like waves crashing onto familiar shore. Shufi clung to her side. Lope stood back for a second, his earlier mischief now tempered by something deeper worry. The crowd saw only a mother rejoining her children. But Umbi? He saw a piece of his heart return from the brink. He saw the fragile line between safety and loss. And he knew the battle wasn't over, because what was coming next would test him in a way no son's prank ever could. Not a game. Not a playful jab. But something darker, and when it came, it would change everything. This isn't just a story. It's a cry from the soul of nature. The moment Ozala returned to her family, it was as if the entire enclosure exhaled. The air, once tense with worry and the quiet dread of separation, filled with soft rustles and hushed joy. The boys Lope and Shufi rushed to her side, their movements instinctual, their sounds tender and familiar. They didn't need to be told she was fragile, they felt it. And in that wild way only animals truly understand, they surrounded her with an unspoken love. They pressed close, offering nuzzles and soft pats like children welcoming a mother back. From battle, Ozala, though still weak, responded immediately. Her arms opened, her breath deepened. Her instincts, the sacred code etched into every mother's soul, took over. She embraced her boys, her strength pouring into their small bodies, like the return of sunlight after a long storm. And in that moment, time slowed. As a mother comforts her child, so I will comfort you. Her arms, worn from illness but never from love, wrapped around their wriggling frames. Even when their constant energy once wore on her nerves, even when their games turned chaotic, Ozala knew now she had missed it all. Missed them. Their noise, their presence, their uncontainable life. And the boys changed, if only briefly. Lope, the crown prince of mischief, softened his steps. Shufi, the little whirlwind, quieted his storms. They nestled beside her instead of climbing, watched her instead of tugging, as if the wisdom of healing had temporarily landed in their hearts. The mischief paused. The chaos calmed. And for a time the family moved as one, the sons in quiet devotion, the mother in recovering grace, the father in steady watchfulness. Love is patient, love is kind, even when covered in fur and born into the wild. But peace, especially in the wild, is fleeting. One afternoon, the sun high and the leaves whispering through the open enclosure, Shufi couldn't help himself. He was playing chase with Lopefast, furious, joyful. Their feet pounded the earth like thunder in miniature. And then it happened, a misstep, a collision. Shufi's small but strong frame barreled into Ozala, sending her staggering to the side. She wasn't knocked down, but her breath hitched. Her balance faltered. And a tremble ran through her body as the world tilted beneath her recovering limbs. The moment shattered the calm. Laughter ceased. The chase halted, a heartbeat passed, then another. And then a low, steady rumble filled the enclosure. Fathers, do not provoke your children, but protect your house and your love with fire. Umbi stood. Slowly, like a mountain rising. His shoulders rolled with contained power, and his eyes found Shufi, not with rage, but with the weight of centuries. With the gaze of a father who had seen too many careless moments become lasting scars. His growl wasn't loud, but it was final. And Shufi, sweet, reckless Shufi, felt it. His small body froze. His mouth, once open in laughter, now closed in remorse. He dropped his head, his eyes avoiding the silverback's stare. And without a word he moved away, shoulders slumped, spirit subdued. Into the far corner he went, a quiet exile of his own making, where the lessons of his mistake echoed louder than any scolding ever could. Those whom the Father loves, he corrects not to break them, but to build their strength and spirit. Silence settled over the family like mist. Lope stood unsure. Ozala watched with quiet forgiveness already blooming in her eyes, and Shufi, he sat still. A stillness not from fear, but from reflection. In the solitude of that corner, the little gorilla didn't pout. He pondered. He traced his steps. He whispered apologies with lowered eyes and folded arms. And within that stillness grew something sacred, a promise. Not the kind spoken in words, but lived in choices. A promise to do better, to move slower, to watch more carefully, to honor the mother who had only just returned, and the father who had shown him where the line had been drawn. The wise in heart accept correction, but fools repeat their folly. Even the young of the forest must grow. And Umbi steady, watching, waiting, let the silence teach. He knew the boy's heart. Knew that mistakes were not enemies, but pathways. And just as quickly as the correction came, so too did forgiveness. The rumble faded, the shoulders relaxed. The father, now satisfied that the message had landed, turned his gaze back toward the trees, back toward peace. Lope joined his brother not long after, nudging him gently, like saying, "Come on. It's okay." And together, the two found a new game to play, one quieter, more careful. They no longer tugged at Ozala's limbs or crashed near her side. They walked beside her now, rested with her, brought her leaves instead of leaping through them, and their laughter returned lighter than before, threaded with something new understanding. Honor your father and mother, so that your days may be long in the land. The enclosure breathed again, life resumed. Ozala's strength had returned in full, her appetite restored, her gaze bright. No longer frail, she moved with confidence again, her steps firm but elegant. Her voice still wild, still joyous, had evolved. They were learning the quiet choreography of family, when to play, when to pause, and when to simply be present. The zoo staff watched with full hearts. Visitors paused longer at the gorilla enclosure than they had at any other exhibit. Cameras captured more than behavior. They caught stories. Real, raw stories of parental wisdom, of learning and growing, of mischief and mercy. The gorilla family had become more than just an attraction. They were a lesson wrapped in fur, a mirror of every family who's ever stumbled toward love with messy grace, the righteous care for the needs of their animals, and in their love reveal the soul of humanity. And though the zoo continued, with its daily rhythm, the feedings, the tours, the quiet whispers of school children pointing in wonder, the memory of that moment lingered. The moment when a child's mistake met a father's gaze. The moment when forgiveness was not spoken, but lived. The moment when a mother, tired and healing, was cherished more deeply than ever before. Visitors left changed. Staff spoke of it often, and even as Lope and Shufi returned to their usual antics, now and then, they would glance toward Umbi, remembering. Respecting Dad, did you feel something while hearing this story? What would you do if your kids kept poking you during your only rest of the day? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, if it made you smile, reflect, or even tear up, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every moment of nature teaches us something about life, love, and what it means to truly care. Until next time, thank you for being part of this wild journey. See you in the next story.